Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 184.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
All right, gentlemen, I'm sitting in the captain's chair, or the captain's couch today. We are here at Studio F.
Indeed. Yes.
Indeed.
Johnny's Game Room.
Johnny's Game Room, just down the hall from the portal to the negative zone.
That's right. Good thing that you can't smell over a podcast. You never know.
That's true. That is quite true. Because when a nihilist goes, he goes.
That's correct. That's right.
So today, it's a Hoopajoob. This is one that I suggested we do. We actually got to one I suggested. This is amazing. This is a banner day, gentlemen.
Okay.
Yes, okay. The sarcasm filter is now off.
That's right. That's it.
Well, no, that's not true.
I was going to say, we don't have one of those.
Out of 184, he suggested one topic, and
That's
of course we're doing it.
Yes,
right.
yes, yeah, 184.
I'm teasing Robert a little bit here. Listen.
Well, compared to the number of ones that are special episodes that we indulged Francis or Martin with, yeah, 1 out of 184 sounds about right.
That's about, yeah. I think he's got the drop on his text.
Yes. The proof is in the record. Just go listen to all 184 episodes. Somebody in our wonderful listeners, Otterites, and send us an email at robert@snakesandotters.com, because want to send it to me, because if you send it to them, we'll never hear about it. Yeah. And we'll figure out what the ratio is. Anyway, so we're doing a Hoopajoob. It, as you know, listeners, we have changed the format. We are no longer weekly. So we are doing the second and fourth Fridays of the month, and occasionally we'll drop in a Hoopajoob. Yeah. Because of weather and other issues, we ended up having to record, because it was supposed to go a couple of days ago.
Yes, this Hoopajoob should have come out December
30th. Because that would be the fifth Friday of the month. So we're still keeping it the fifth Friday.
Yes.
Or whenever we feel like it.
It's a touch late, but, it's not as worrisome as, a teenage girl that's a touch late.
Exactly. Never that way.
Yeah, all right.
Or a full-grown woman whose husband is away for the last 6 months.
And who is a touch late.
And is a touch late, yes.
You're working on it. Don't give up your day job, guys. Yeah. Let's skip a bit, brother. Let's move on.
Would that I could give up my day job and devote my time to things that interest me.
Like writing.
There
you go.
See? Nice segue.
That's exactly what we tease him up. We pitches him right over the plate. Come on.
Well done, Centurion.
So,
that's right.
This Hoopajoob, it's on writing. And it's one that I've been wanting to do for a while because, we are all now in the midst of various projects. Mm-hmm. Martin has finally got his fingers off his butt. Wait, that didn't come out right. Gotten off his butt.
Okay, Jack Aubrey.
On the keyboard. And is working, and he's nearly 30,000 words in, right? Give or take a little.
Yeah, I'm at 28. 28.
30,000 sounds so much better.
Yeah, 28,000, 6 homicides, and a kidnapping.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, that's right. A crime novel, we should say. Yes,
right. It is a crime story.
Because genre does matter.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's
one of the things that...
But all the greatest stories are love stories, according to Deadpool.
Oh, well.
But even with Deadpool, all of the greatest love stories are still murder stories.
Well, you raise it, you say it flippantly, but you raise a good point that if you don't have human relationships... tied within your fiction work, they're almost worthless.
Well, exactly.
And romance is the number one. I mean, my God, you know how many billions of dollars the romance genre makes?
It's the biggest money.
It's the biggest number one. Everybody reads it. Everybody loves it, even though nobody apparently admits to it.
Well, women do.
Women do. That's right. Yeah. Because it's, but it's not exclusively female.
No, it's not. But just most guys that that probably don't admit it, but the ones that do, that's fine. To me, read what you want. Read as many books as you possibly can. Support your local author. Support your any author you like.
Absolutely.
Like when I find an author that I like and he's on or she is on Kindle Unlimited, I will still often buy the book because it's still cheap.
Yeah.
But they get more money off of the direct purchase.
Sure.
And so if I like it, I'll spend the extra $2 or $3 rather, because Kindle Unlimited is great. You get to read a crap ton of stuff for free, essentially. It's $10 a month. You can read as many books as you want. And there's everything from crime to action, adventure, fantasy, horror, science fiction, and romance, and any other mix you can think of.
If it's fiction, it's there.
Right. And it's not just self-published authors.
Right.
It is, probably not as many A-listers, like a Stephen King. He's not going to be in Kindle Unlimited. But he is on Scribd.
Really?
Scribd is about the same price, about $10 a month. Same deal. You can read as many as you want. There are more professionally published authors on Scribd than there are on Kindle Unlimited, but it's the same deal. And matter of fact, I think I read all the Brad Thors on Scribd.
Oh yeah, Brad Thor is excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah. So back to the actual writing, not just the reading. We've all been working very assiduously on our books, and in various stages. So I've completed a couple of manuscripts. The first one of the nonfiction I ended up throwing out because I didn't like the way it came off. Because it's a nonfiction, so it came off more like a bunch of blog post articles, which is great because I have a 100 or more blog posts now that I can feed into that site.
Okay, yeah.
The other nonfiction book is in its final stages of editing, and hopefully will be done in the next month or so. And then, of course, I have the fiction book, which, as I was telling Francis at a funeral we were at last month, I ended up writing in what I thought was going to be the first book of a series. Ended up being the first half of the first book and the second half of the last book of the series, because both are really good. But if I want to make it a series, the way I ended it is the perfect ending for the final book of the series.
Yeah.
So
you got to cat feed this and pull this apart
exactly,
and enter some intermediate pieces.
And that's what I've been spending the last several weeks.
Put the ending on a shelf until whenever the time comes.
And I'm sure it will be reworked when I get there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So this is you're creating kind of a universe and everything with yours.
Yes.
Right? So
authors really do, unless you're doing true crime or true history.
Yeah.
You're still creating an entire universe.
But you're kind of going the Frank Herbert route here.
Frank Herbert, George R.R. Martin, although hopefully it will not take me as long to finish a book as it takes him, or anybody else that does a series. David Weber, he's probably one of the better known for sci-fi and modern authors.
What is the other series that you guys have enjoyed that goes back a ways?
Thomas Covenant?
The Thomas Covenant series.
Right.
Yeah, that's a sword and sorcery kind of fantasy, very Lord of the Rings-esque.
Yeah,
he will tell you
high fantasy. Yeah, but it's not. But it's unique. It's not
very unique. Yeah.
It does not contain all the expected tropes like so much high fantasy does. They basically take Tolkien and turn in a few directions. So many of them do.
Yeah, it's a fish out of water story, very much so. You take a modern man and you drop him into this fantasy setting.
Right.
And which is great. I love anything you take a twist on something you would expect. But you were talking about genre being very important. It's one of the things that you learn once you really get into your writing and you're serious about it.
Yep.
Genre is the number one thing you have to figure out.
That's right.
You have to figure that out first.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, your story ultimately is going to end up, unless you're incredibly lucky or incredibly naturally gifted. And there are very few of either.
Right.
Because any writer worth his salt will tell you, you got to work hard at this stuff.
That's right.
It's a job.
Yeah.
Now, it's a job that is one of the most satisfying things that you can do if you're really a writer, not just somebody who's working at it because they think they can, but maybe they don't really have enough raw talent or don't put enough time on their craft.
Well, so many people want to have written,
but so few want to
actually write. I mean, that's kind of an old joke in the industry, but it's very true because it's one of those places where it requires an enormous will to learn. I mean, it's very Nietzschean in certain ways because you have to will your way to greatness, and that requires a long, hard struggle and the willingness to throw your narcissistic tendencies out the window if you want to be successful.
Right. Your narcissistic tendencies are for book marketing, not book writing.
That's right. Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you have to have some of that.
Yeah.
Once you mark it, yeah.
But you gotta apply it in the right place. So we're all writing, and I was just gonna get to Francis. He's finished his first.
Yeah.
And it has. I don't know which version of the draft you've sent us, but you're a few drafts into the second book.
Oh, the second book's done. The second book is essentially done, and the first book is essentially done. Now, that doesn't mean I don't sit back down and tighten a little bit more. And I went back through the first book after 3-4 months of not really touching it, and I discovered that I can make this better. I can make this better. I can make very little actually changed, other than a few. I recognized one of the linchpins of that story, indeed of the series that I'm doing, is the relationship between the two protagonists. Sort of, kind of, the female is the main. If you've seen or watched Outlander, you recognize that Claire is the main protagonist, but Jamie is almost identical, and that relationship is what keeps people reading those books. I'm playing off that same thing. Is the relationship between these two characters together is what propels the story forward. Of course, that means that they, as things happen and they get separated, try to get back together, all sorts of different things like that. Because it's a thriller. They're thrillers.
Yeah. Right. So we've got 3 different genres going here. I took the stab at crime, and you're kind of doing the high fantasy style.
No. Mine's not high fantasy. Mine is it's a supernatural thriller.
Supernatural thriller
is the way I would put it, because it is definitely supernatural. But it is in a modern setting. It's not werewolves and vampires, so it's not straight horror the way we would normally think. There's no zombies, not yet. That's a different book series I have planned.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would call it a supernatural thriller with a bit of a psychological thriller thrown in.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So you got a little bit of a Thomas Harris influence in there. Little Silence of the Lambs maybe going on.
A bit, yeah, with that from a supernatural perspective, yeah. There's definitely some mental and psychological torture that goes on in this book.
Okay. And then Francis has kind of your great thriller...
Espionage thriller is probably...
Ian Fleming, Brad Thor...
Yeah, I would... If you want to know who I don't want to say idolize, but who I really like the best, because you're right, those names are classics. Those are, Fleming started the genre, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
But I do not want to be that. So many of those types are very cookie cutter, and I don't want to be that. Mine is more, it is a thriller, which is a broad meta genre, but there are many subs underneath that.
Every broad genre has its subs.
Right.
Because really, I was thinking when you were just talking about the book and the series, you were describing a thriller. You were describing a romance series.
Oh, there's which is kind of leads me to one of my points I want to make sure I make is, and you'll get this if you read enough advice on writing, is that melding romance into whatever you're writing is a win-win. Yes. People want that. They read that enables them to hook to your characters. Having an element of that.
Audience too.
That's correct.
Because
when you got to have it.
When you think about the genre that you are, your overarching genre, it's a male-dominated readership.
Correct. And I want to subvert that a little bit.
Right. And which is a good thing. I think that drawing as many people, obviously. One of the big pieces of advice that writers will give you is to come up with who you're writing for. Stephen King talks about it in On Writing, which I got the guy's physical copies. I think Francis had an electronic copy.
I did, yes. That's right.
But honestly, I think books on writing need to be books. I really do.
Absolutely.
Fiction I like electronic, but for things I want to ponder, I like physical copies. That's why I like my history. My individual biographies, things like that, my theology, I like physical books. Mm-hmm. But for the mind candy, the fiction, which is what I think of it as, that's electronic, because I can pick that and read it anywhere. I don't need to ponder that. I don't have to have the time. But anyways, you have to know who your audience is. And often they will tell you, figure out one person you're writing for. It doesn't have to be a real person. It can be. But figure out who that is. So in a way, you, with Francis, you're kind of turning that on your ear, because if you want to make it appealable to both, you're not necessarily writing for 2 people.
No.
But it's not to say when you write for one, you're only writing for one gender or the other. But
No,
you know,
it shouldn't be.
you generally have Sean Coyne calls it SAM, a single audience member. That is who you're writing for, is the target. Now he takes a little bit tact differently because like in first person, yours is first person, right, Martin? No, you're writing third person. I'm sorry, I'm thinking first person because a lot of crime is first person. That's what I was thinking. And a lot of times that first person is intended to be written to somebody. So like with
young adult fiction is primarily
Yes.
is first person.
So like when you look at
female.
Sherlock Holmes, Watson is the author. He's the one telling the story.
It's all coming from his perspective.
Exactly. And he's telling somebody about it. Well, who he's telling it is that person you're writing for, in that sense. So, it's important to keep that in mind. So genre and who you're writing for is very, very important. Genre is important because you got to know what goes in the damn book.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you read my book, every guy that reads it will absolutely get what's expected from the genre. It's perfectly in there. Sometimes that comes from a female, but it is not the female who's been masculinized.
Right.
And
yes, the females in your book are very feminine.
That's correct. That's deliberate.
They are, as far as the protagonists go, they are very feminine. They are very much so individuals. They are not stereotypes.
Not at all.
And they're strong.
Strong character. It's right, without being that stereotypical strong character, which is basically masculinizing a woman. Right. It's not that at all.
Well, and strong female leads, that's where the money's at.
That's correct. That's part of it. I just thought that this is an untapped thing. Why can't you take this type of a thriller and have the lead be? And Diana Gabaldon with Outlander showed me, you can do this and do this well. I mean, in many respects, her reader would be my reader as well. It's just a different genre. Hers is more historical.
Right.
But this is...
historical as far as different time periods. Obviously, yours is written
That's
in a
true.
30-year-old time period as well.
It is set in a specific time and place. That is
correct. You're anchored specifically in the 1990s.
Right. Yes.
Which is fine. To us, that doesn't seem like it's a historical period, but for a lot of our listeners, it might be.
Yeah, I mean, when you think 1993 is now, holy crap, 30 years ago.
Right.
Right.
Well, let's put it this way. We are just as far from 1993 as 1993 is from the assassination of Kennedy.
Yes.
Okay, now that I feel old.
Right.
Although none of us were alive then, so I don't feel quite that old.
Correct.
But, yeah. Genre's important. And these are the kind of things that I love about writing is it's not just sitting down and spewing a bunch of words onto paper or screen. It's not. It's got to be more than that. Right. If you're going to do it, you need to take it seriously. We talk all the time about craft on this show.
Yes, that's right.
And writing, I think, is one of those things where craft is so underestimated by those who would like to have written, but don't want to write.
Well, they don't recognize the craft and the art that goes into this. They really don't. They think that any hack can sit down and just spew stuff out. Well, that is true in a literal sense. It's also nobody wants to read that. Nobody wants to read anything. I mean, whether that be literary fiction or we're just talking fiction here, but whether it be literary fiction or commercial fiction. Narcissism, there's no place for that.
Well, I don't even think it's always even narcissism. It's just that lack of the willingness to put in the work to learn. Because, I'm not going to go and hire somebody to do remodeling in my house that hasn't taken the time to learn how to actually do it.
Right.
I don't want to, hire somebody that has just watched a bunch of YouTube videos. That's what I do.
Right. Yeah.
But if I want it done right, I want somebody who's actually done the work,
right?
Who's actually put the time and effort.
If you're wanting to actually, and we'll use commercial fiction for lack of the better term, if you want somebody to buy your books, you better be able to fit within the conventions of the craft,
right?
Of what people expect. And believe it or not, there is that. I mean, a good story. Some people may bemoan, stories all sound the same, blah, blah, blah. Well, there is a truth to that because we're wired to respond in certain ways to them.
Right.
If you want somebody to buy them.
I don't know a whole lot. I've heard a whole lot of people complain about that. Now, they might complain about that from certain authors, definitely.
That's formulaic. And
the stories are formula.
That's correct. If you zoom out far enough, they all are formulaic.
Yes.
And they have to be. Otherwise, they're not interesting.
Well, let's talk about let's get down to the mechanics here. So let's talk about what a story is. So obviously, any good story is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. That's obvious.
Yeah.
But even more granular, you've got your inciting incident. What kicks off the story? What is that thing that kicks off the conflict? Because that's the other thing a lot of people don't understand. Story has to have conflict.
Huge. That's huge. You don't get to sit around
even romance, especially romance.
That's right. Absolutely.
Has to have conflict.
Yeah, and a lot of the complaints that I hear about that, because the romance industry, because it's the biggest, it is extremely formulaic in those stories. You have to have it where these things here happen. And if you read a lot of those, you might say, well, this is the same story, just changing things around. But that's what people want. Well, people keep going back to that. They don't say that. They say, bring it on.
But they like the differences, though.
That's correct.
That's what's important. But to prove that point is true, look at the Hallmark Channel.
That's correct.
Christmas is the obvious time when you think about all of those, but they do non-Christmas Hallmark movies. But they're all the same thing. Some woman, big city girl or small town girl, meets this guy who's either from the other place. She's big city, he's small town.
Right.
It's very, very rare that they're both small town or both big city. Yeah. And they meet, and they're initially one of them is destined for somebody else. And when they come together, they realize, he's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And they think, we're kind of interested in each other. And then there's something that sends them apart. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they come back together and they realize, oh yes, you're my true love. And there's one kiss. There's only ever one kiss in a Hallmark movie, and that's at the end.
Yeah.
Because you got to have that. Lover's first kiss is an important trope that goes into a romance story. But look at how many different versions of those movies there are. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the Hallmark Channel anymore. There's the Great American, whatever it is, that Candace Cameron Bure is now moved over to. She's doing a specific type,
right.
the traditional marriage.
For instance, you got any Pepto around here?
Yeah, well, I understand you don't like these, but these are great examples.
Stomach over.
But they're proving the point, though, that each genre is important and it's got its tropes. Trope has a bad name.
That's right,
but it's not. A trope is simply what is expected out of the genre.
That's right. You discard those at your peril.
You do.
That's
now,
right.
You use the cliched ones at your peril.
That's correct.
But there are core tropes that go with every.
And it has to be.
genre.
It has to. And if you write well, you're doing it where it seems natural.
Yes,
that's where you.
Because if we think about it, a trope is simply nothing more than it's a single part of everyday life. Mm-hmm. It's just that in a particular kind of story, it's amplified.
Yeah, I mean, caca occurs. That's the story of how it works.
And that's what makes the story interesting. Events have to happen.
Right.
Yes. But to slide into character just slightly, any book that is simply a matter of crap happening, external stuff happening to a character over and over and over again.
How the character responds.
It's very weak. It's very diluted because there's no agency on the character.
I mean, there's a difference between agency and change for the character.
Well, that's correct.
So, for instance, in the thriller genre that you are essentially writing in, although we might call it romantic thriller if we want it, but because there's that romance aspect to it. But,
there was, but
historical thriller. I still don't call it a historical.
Well, espionage thriller is really
it's a thriller that's set in historical time. Because we had this discussion once about whether he's writing a historical novel that also happens to be a thriller, or a thriller with a historical setting.
And it's the latter.
It's a thriller with an historical setting.
That's right. And to be honest,
I agree.
Now, the first book in particular is very tightly tied to that because it takes place during specific historical events. The second, not at all.
Right.
So it's really...
Well, it sort of does, but not
It
not
does, very lightly so.
That's more background than foreground. First book is very, very definitely foreground.
But because it literally takes place during specific events. That's why you have dates and timestamps put through there in order to make sure everything makes sense.
Well, dates and timestamps, that's a... Since you brought that up,
yeah.
That is a great mechanism, though, for filling in the reader things that you don't necessarily want to have to spend 20 pages spending time on. London, September 23rd, 1887. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, this might be a Jack the Ripper story.
Right.
That, and immediately your mind fills in a crap ton of blanks.
That's correct. That's right. That's just a shorthand for working. Working through things.
Let me press you a little bit on that because I want to draw you out on that. So some of your events have to be driven by the characters.
Yes.
But not necessarily all events.
That is probably the best way to do that.
Yeah, how to meld those pieces together.
You will read online a lot of folks that absolutely savage the concept of external events moving the story along, because it says because the character doesn't change. They might, but the internal change is something that's more out there.
But
I'm not necessarily saying this is truth. I'm saying this is common. That this is being said.
But I think 99% of the time, though, that's a good criticism, because if your characters don't change, especially protagonists.
That's right.
But if your characters don't change, your story is almost always flawed. Now, I will give you an example where that is the exception to the rule. Mm-hmm. So, have you seen the movie The Martian?
Yes.
Okay, so that is character Mark Watney, who is stranded on Mars accidentally. Yeah. They think he's dead, he's not. All right, and that book is about the mechanics of his and it's also a movie. It is about the mechanics of his survival. He does not change. He's the same guy in the beginning as he is at the end, with one minor exception, is that he's never going into space again. Which it doesn't say that, but I think that's pretty much understood. Right. Yeah, he's never leaving the planet again.
I'm done. Yeah.
But other than that, he has not changed.
Sure.
Now that's rare.
It is rare.
And that is so. To talk about the exception, you almost have to make a big deal about it being the exception. Your characters have to change.
There are some.
That doesn't mean. Go ahead. So it doesn't mean that the external events can't drive part of the story, but the part of the story that matters is how your characters respond to the events.
Right. That is
because
correct.
That's how your first book has to be understood and has to be written from, is how the characters respond to the events. Now, they can also affect the events, because as we went back and forth about how to make your book better, one particular change, you had your characters interact with the external event and that made the external event relevant to the story, because that's part of the problem. A lot of times, external events, especially in things that are historical or things that the author just thinks is cool, have absolutely no bearing on what the main story is.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately we fixed with what you were doing in your book.
Right.
Because you had a lot of stuff that wasn't really relevant to the journey the characters were on. But you fixed it by making it relevant or cutting it if it didn't need to be there.
Right.
And fixed it tremendously.
Yes.
For what we've seen, and I'm anxious to see a final edited, printed version of this. You wove that stuff together tremendously.
Well, it takes time. It was as Sulu would say. Actually, it was my first attempt. So it works. You have to learn these things on the ground as it takes.
And I'm benefiting from what the two of you all have been through.
Writing the second book was a cakewalk compared to the first, because I'd learned so much.
But I'm attempting to do that same thing.
Yeah.
Have most of the events driven by the characters, but at the same time recognizing, like you said, sometimes weird shit just happens.
Well, to be honest,
it's out of the blue. And what do you do with that?
The blend is probably the sweet spot.
Well, yeah, it is.
How do you make the characters then respond to this out of the blue event that they didn't have any control over?
Well, if you make everything specifically, all of the conflict come entirely from the characters and the characters' interaction, on the surface that sounds like good advice, but it's not. Because you run the risk of having everything come off as a whiny-ass soap opera.
Yeah.
And you don't want that.
Yeah.
So the external events are also important. So, and if you're talking about crime...
It gets into realism, too.
Well, it changes scope, too.
Real stuff happens to people in the real world.
Well,
and the more you want your story rooted in reality,
Exactly.
Well,
And with
depends on
crime-
that's genre dependent. Romance does not
Well,
apply.
no, I think he's talking about reality as in the way characters would behave and react.
That's correct. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it doesn't necessarily, because even in
It's-
fantasy, they've got to behave and react in ways that they're going to come off as authentic.
Right. Recognizable.
Yes.
So true to that character.
And true to that character, yeah. And that's the authentic part. In crime, that's a great example of external events have to drive part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the whole point. An
That's
external event has happened.
That's right.
Unless it's a revenge tale. But even then, it's usually an external event that's happened to somebody that
Previously, yeah.
Previously, that has happened to the character's loved ones. Think Charles Bronson and
Death Wish.
Death Wish. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's a great example of the external event drives the revenge of this character.
Yeah.
And so again, you got to have a balance. It can't all just be whiny ass people pining for somebody else or whatever. There's got to be something else that goes on that really makes it have that realism.
Yeah.
So that's a lot on the
Yeah. So I want to press you on another question.
Sure.
For two of you guys, but I think at 30 minutes in, let's do our bourbon break. Oh boy, we got a great bourbon break for you.
What's your question first? Let's tease the audience.
I want to ask you guys about dialogue. Dialogue's a big part of what I'm working on. And I've got, of course, cops talk one way, street people talk another way, and I want to try to capture authentic dialogue. So I want to ask you guys about dialogue.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, that is a great way to say, all right, audience, think about that for a minute. And now we're going to do bourbon break. So 2 days ago, on Saturday, we went to the Frazier History Museum here in town.
Yes, which has been through many transformations
It
over
has.
the
It
years.
started as the Frazier Historical Arms Museum, which was just phenomenal. Oh my gosh.
absolutely, yeah.
Because a lot of history really is tied up with wars. Wars
very much
are
so.
one of the biggest.
Firearms,
Yeah, it's one of the biggest. Well, it wasn't even just firearms there. We had swords and cannons and bows and arrows. I mean, everything. And then it changed into more general history. And now it's specifically Kentucky history.
Yes.
Which, of course, when you think of Kentucky history, outside of Kentucky, you're going to think of, well, there's Daniel Boone and there's the Wilderness Trail if you're really into history. But if you're in Kentucky, you're going to think, oh, well, let's talk bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And the entire third floor.
Yeah, the whole third floor is no longer that Royal Armories that had to send all that back to Britain. That stuff, the Frazier was the only place outside the British Isles that Royal Armory stuff had ever been displayed.
Right. Which is a huge feather in their cap.
Yeah. So that's all been returned, and now the third floor has been pretty much transformed into a bourbon thing.
Yes.
A bourbon experience.
The Frazier is the first official stop on the Bourbon Trail now. Mm-hmm. And the Bourbon Trail, for those of you who don't know it, is basically a list of distilleries that you would go and visit, and you got a little passport, and you get a stamp at every distillery. And the goal is to fill it up.
Yeah, so it's to take the tours,
Yes.
distillery tours, and do it. So Robert had arranged for us to not only visit the Frazier, but to do the Bourbon Experience tasting, which is so awesome in that it was like a limited audience. This is not 50 people in a room.
Yeah, there was a dozen.
But a dozen people, and two of ours didn't even show up.
Right, which is to our benefit.
Because we consumed what they had.
A bourbon ambassador. So Sam, an employee of the Frazier, who was a bourbon ambassador.
Big shout out to Sam.
Yeah, he did a great job.
What a great presentation he did. And then we got to try 3 bourbons.
3 bourbons. Larceny,
Larceny.
which we've talked about on the show
We have
before.
featured before, yes.
Great bourbon.
Russell Reserve 10-year-old.
Which we
Yes.
have had that before.
I don't think we've had that
Yes,
here.
we did, because it was given to me for a Christmas present 2 years ago, and we consumed it all.
That Russell, really, that 10
that was the one.
I do
Yes,
not
it was.
remember doing that because
Yes, you drank it.
my daughter's got my eldest spawn got me that for Christmas this year, so I have a bottle unopened sitting at
Well,
home.
2 years ago, my middle spawn gave me that one, and we did sample it here on the
Yes,
program.
and
recall.
I've had it in the past, and I like it. The Larceny was more of a wheat.
Yes.
Russell was more of a rye.
Well, it said it had a
it's
hint of
peppery.
rye. It's a very small hint.
Yes. A
And
very
then our third one was more the high end, was the Old Forester 1920 Prohibition style.
Yeah.
115 proof.
Which we have raved about
That's
on this program.
It's down the hall. I mean, it's on my shelf. Yeah.
I find it an awesome, super complex, tons of flavor. Just all this great stuff comes out of it, and we just absolutely loved it. And another huge feature. Again, there was only 10 people in this group. Next to us was a young woman from, of all places, New York City,
right?
Who was house/cat sitting for someone here in town who's on a ski vacation.
Yeah, it's kind of like the reverse of a of the B&B.
Yeah,
where you find people who need you to come in and keep an eye on their place.
Right, and she of course is like part of some agency that does this, had to be bonded or background check and all this stuff. But that's what she does. She travels the country house sitting for people, and she does things in the town where she's staying.
And she's a big lover of bourbon, so she came here.
She wanted to hear all about cocktails and New York, what they drink in New York.
Old fashions is what she was.
She likes the old fashions. Yeah.
Right.
So she wanted to experience some bourbon, and she was just a hoot.
She was
absolute, and we told her all about the podcast, and we told her she was going to get a shout out this episode.
So her nickname, obviously we don't use real names. We use nom de pods, as Martin likes to call it. Her nickname is Spragga. So shout out to Spragga.
That's right. Hope you're listening.
Very entertaining young woman to talk to, and she really enjoyed talking about the bourbon. Yeah. That was nice.
Yeah. Spragga and NYC. The shout out to you. She's going to listen to the episodes, and just she was just a hoot, man. She had a great time.
Yeah,
and she felt very welcomed in Little While. I think she really enjoyed it.
My favorite moment though was what the F is Verner's.
This is
true. I mean, that's how wide-ranging the discussion we got when we talk about soft drinks
and what you mix with bourbons, whether or not it's appropriate or not.
And she wanted to know all about Ale 81.
That's right, which is local.
So that's a local thing.
Locally made here, And,
of course, being from Michigan, I'm big on the Verner's. That's the original ginger soda.
Yeah, not ginger ale, ginger
soda. Yes, and
but I mean, even after the other crew had left, there's some folks there from South Carolina and another local fella. And they had all left. The four of us still were sitting there, and Sam's like, "Okay, well, we're done, guys." We're still sitting there.
Yeah, he's everything's locked. He's like, just shut the door on your way out.
Yeah.
But speaking of bourbon, though, what are we drinking today?
Oh yes, so I got some of your. Show me the bottle there. It is the Old Bardstown.
That's what I'm
drinking. It's a Weller
too.
family bottle. And it's bottled in bond. We talked about that. Sam did a great job explaining that.
Yeah. Willett Distillery.
Yes.
Is where it comes from.
The Bottled in Bond Act of 1897 is where it comes from. And it's a set of regulations about
purity and consistency.
Sealing it up and consistency.
So,
which we heard all about on our on
and
Saturday.
He did a great job because he nailed it. He absolutely nailed why it was a thing. So this is bottled in bond. Generally, you don't see a whole lot on bottles anymore. Surprisingly, but it's got a specific legal definition it has to meet, and this is a pretty good bourbon. Like many bourbons, straight out of the bottle is perhaps a little harsher.
100 proof,
and it's 100 proof. Yeah, I picked that specifically because it was the 100 proof.
Yeah.
The what was the other one that was up there?
We had the Wild Turkey.
There's a third.
Oh, the McKenna.
The McKenna. That was 80 proof. So
which
not that I don't necessarily like 80 proof. But I like ice in mine, so that tends to water it down even more.
Yeah, if you're going to go neat, the lower proofs are better.
Exactly. I like ice, as we've talked about many times. Like ice
and therefore
mine.
A higher proof is better.
And we discussed that with Sam. We even used our term for it, and he liked it.
Yeah.
He liked our term blooming.
Yes. Yeah, he had some great advice on how to go about bourbon tasting. It was really wonderful. But so this was Old Bardstown.
Old Bardstown.
Old Bardstown, yes. So once you get that water in there to have that flavor bloom, as we called it, really smooths it out and gives you a nice.
The fine folks at Willett do a really good job. This is their lower priced bourbon.
It's about 18.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not. They have some really high end stuff. out there from there. This is not that. This is the standard, everyday, basic 100 proof, but it is extremely popular. It's an old brand. It's been around for a long time. That they, I don't know if Willett always owned it, but they certainly
not.
Willett's been around a while, surprisingly.
Well, they have, yes, but it's one of those things where names and almost nobody has a bourbon that has been their bourbon forever.
Well,
Old Forester is one of those few,
definitely.
Yeah. Well, but compared to the total,
well, that's correct. There's because
almost nobody has,
because a lot of those old brands, and we saw that at the museum. You can see these old bottles of brands that we have not necessarily heard of or have made a comeback because somebody owned that brand. Yeah, and they had to sell it, which as we talked about, the irony of it, the J.W. Dant brand, which we've not featured on the show, was sold to Heaven Hill by the Dant family. My grandfather actually worked for them back in the 40s.
Yes, every time we had one come up in discussion during the tours, my grandfather worked for them, my father worked for them, my great-great-great-great-grandfather worked for them, or
there was some of that,
More than that, Francis was correcting the historical notes.
Well, I was.
Yes, you really do need to get a hold of them, and
that is correct. They made
a couple of blunders in some of their historical.
Well, more than a couple. Yeah, there were quite. I mean, probably half dozen that you talked about. Various stages of.
Well, one of which was my. I guess he's my 5th or 6th great grandfather. They spoke of him, last name Boone, Walter Boone. He was the original.
Yes, this is the most egregious.
The original migrant from Maryland down here, and they said he was a cousin of Daniel Boone. And I'm thinking, all of us who have been into genealogy would absolutely smack you on that because we have been trying to prove or disprove that for a long, long time. And there is no proof other than unless someone has done a DNA, which would be an interesting thing to do. But
well, it's certainly possible nowadays.
Oh yeah, and not to say that they weren't related, perhaps further back, but they were not cousins.
Not in the sense we think of cousins. Even back then, where cousins might have been 3rd or 4th or 5th. Because
that's right.
Small communities, and they,
Daniel Boone was a Pennsylvania Quaker.
Right.
And Walter Boone were Maryland Catholics. Ne'er the twain shall meet. Right. They were totally different, separate branches. If they met further back, maybe, and I suppose technically you could say, well, of course that means cousin.
Well, everybody's a cousin. If
well,
you
that's
want to go
right.
Far enough back.
I just think it was kind of it was almost like celebrity signaling. I didn't like it. Don't do that.
Yeah, that's a bad
it is if you want to do that, you best prove it to me because trust me, I've got.
Yeah, where's the citation?
Where's that proof? Because those of us in the family who do this, and if you're from where I'm from, everybody does it.
That's great.
It's never been
being Catholic.
Nothing been done.
Is the church has all your records?
Many. But fortunately, from the area where this comes from, you've got records back to 1785.
Right.
And the courthouses didn't burn, although Marion counties actually did.
Right.
Thank you, Confederates.
Anyways, that's the Old Bardstown.
That's correct.
Let's get to Mark, which you also have, right?
No, I'm drinking Old Bardstown here. We finished that bottle off. Yes.
So, but you didn't really talk about it. I get a hint. I get a very sweet flavor from the. Once the water is.
I'm having it over ice, although the ice is melted right now.
Ice is melted.
It's really good. It's still chilled. Still got the chill.
But yeah, it's definitely there's a sweet flavor to it. You get a lot of really up in the mouth.
Mild
on the kiss
on the tongue and on the mouth. You're exactly right.
Even hint up into the nasal passage.
Yes.
So, Martin, you got the Wild Turkey, right?
I've got Wild Turkey 101, which I have not had, and I just finished off.
You've never had that?
Not the 101.
I was going to say because
my regular Wild Turkey is one of my favorites, but the 101 I have not had a chance to try.
I was going to say because I thought we'd done that one before because the bottle's empty, boys. Now, unless my youngest spawn has slipped it,
and I didn't get a chance to try it.
That is always
possible.
That is possible because we vary.
You've had some of it or something, but I didn't get to because I was
drinking something else.
I remember. Yeah, I think I've had it, but we've one thing we realized when we were there. In the room that is the wall of bourbons.
Yeah.
Which is just, oh my God, that is just so wonderful.
Which took us 15 minutes to figure out it was alphabetical.
Yeah, well.
But we were just kind of in awe.
Yeah, but we realized how many bourbons we've actually tried.
Yeah, and how many we haven't, too.
But, really, we've tried a lot more than I thought.
Yes.
And quite a broad
Yes.
range as well, from inexpensive to mid-range.
Yes, that's one of the things that we did help educate Spragga on, which was that just because a bourbon is inexpensive does not mean it's a bad bourbon.
Yeah, I told her, don't be afraid of a $15 or $20 bourbon. Get the Wild Turkey, get the Evan Williams.
The
They're
Four
still
Roses.
good.
Yeah, Very Old Barton. They're all fine.
Add the Larceny.
Yeah, because Larceny's not. It's a little bit above that, but it's
That
still
was
not
what, like a $35, $40 bottle?
No, Larceny's $24.
Yeah, Larceny's.
Yeah, we got
I'm thinking of the Michters. We talked about the Michters being in that mid-30s, upper 30s.
Oh yeah, and there were
Michters. Yeah, I think I got my Michters at 42.
Oh, okay.
The Russell is about 34, 35s, about the same price point as Basil Hayden is, 35 to 38.
Which could be priced higher, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not. Don't get me wrong.
right, exactly. Yeah, because that's one of our favorites.
Yeah, I mean, we told her, don't be afraid of the inexpensive bourbon. A ton of them are great.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
great. And I do like the Wild Turkey 101. A little spicier than regular Wild Turkey. A little bit higher rye content, which will give you more of the pepper notes.
Yeah.
Less of that pear flavor, correct?
Right.
Because I know that Wild Turkey, that was one of the things that we pulled out of that was unique and really nice.
Yeah.
But it's
Regular
not. It's
Wild
less
Turkey
here.
gives you pear and vanilla. This will give you a little bit spicier, more of a caramel.
Peppery?
Yeah, toffee and spice.
Interesting.
So it's a little spicier,
Well,
a little more peppery.
So since that bottle is empty, are you suggesting that I should repurchase?
That's entirely up to you.
Well, and I'm trying to vary a few things, but there's some favorites we have that that I like to because I'm going to continue to keep Basil Hayden on the shelf. That's kind of to be expected. Most of these Old Foresters, they're going to be regular. I mean, we haven't tried all of them.
All of them.
We've done
Foresters really,
we've done
really
2 of them. Of the particular brands that are hit to a certain year.
I've yet to have an Old Forester I didn't really like.
Yeah, that's one of the very best that we keep coming back to.
We talked about it before. The Old Forester Signature, which one of the reasons I got that was because it was supposed to have been like a poor man's Pappy, which it is very good. It's got a screw top.
Yeah.
You don't think of a good bourbon as having a screw top, but it's a relatively inexpensive bottle.
Yeah.
And it's 100 proof, and it is really, really good, just like all of them.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
I mean, there is not a bad Old Forester that we've had.
Yeah, that's of all the ones that we've had. And
it's 1910. Is that the one we're still looking to try?
There's 1870 we do not have.
Okay.
That was the one that was the original version that they had. We have the 1897 and the 1920, but we do not have the 1910.
Okay,
right.
Yeah,
so there's 2 of them we don't have.
I was saying we had 3 of the 4. But
It's 2 that we've had. That's right. Of course, there are other lines. Old Forester's got a large, diverse
we
line.
have had 3 because you include the Old Forester Signature.
That's correct. Yeah, which, like I said, they have a diversity of flavors, for lack of a better term.
Oh yes,
under that brand. Well, we were looking at Michters, and there were a dozen bottles on the wall of bourbon.
That really struck me as how
I didn't realize how diversified that was on different things.
Yeah, a lot of that also included ryes.
Well, sure. I mean, that's
when there were some that were just straight rye whiskeys in there, which is fine because it's still from the Kentucky distilleries.
And exactly, branding is a big thing, and this and we can circle back to writing on this, because ultimately when you're writing or when you're making bourbon, you're selling a brand. Yes. You have to be able to sell your own brand, and in the case of a writer, it's their own person. It's their own thing. I mean, Stephen King is his own brand.
Because he has a particular voice, and that's a huge part of the brand. Yeah,
and I think that there's value in that. And I think if you want to be successful in either endeavor, whether it be making bourbon or writing, you have to cultivate that brand. In fact, if you go, and this is one of the things that I'm learning as I'm getting to the point where I can start querying agents for my books, you have to be able to have a personal brand as an author. Therefore, you have to have a social media presence, and you don't have. And the more I read about it, the more, and there's diversity of opinion, of course, but as a general rule, you need to be in 2 places, whatever those 2 places are, online. And Facebook is probably not one of them, actually.
No, Facebook is fine for advertising, but not
localized. For that's correct.
Well, I don't know so much that it's localized, but it's one of those things that's very difficult to build a big audience on. It's great for advertising because you can really drill into the demographics.
Well, that's correct. That's another.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they do Facebook ads and they do Amazon ads, and that's where they spend all their money.
Right.
As far as advertising goes. But, it's kind of thing where you're right, there is a mix of opinion about whether or not you have to have a pre-built audience. Because most of them will tell you, no, you don't need a pre-built audience. However, it's a really good idea if you have a pre-built something that shows you're there.
Yeah, you have to have a presence.
Bernard Cornwell and Brad Thor are fairly active on Facebook.
They are. That is correct. That's right.
So, they're at the point where do they even need to be active on Facebook anymore?
Yeah. They like interacting with their fans.
Right. It's a place for them to interact. And that's really what the platform is for. It's interacting with the fans. It can be two-way, like on Facebook. Right. Or it can be one way, blog without comments. Because actually, a lot of the things will tell you, don't put comments on your blog. Not for a writer. Right. Yeah. Because you'll spend way too... Well, once you get to a certain size, you'll spend way too much time trying to manage the comments. And nobody needs that.
Right. Instagram is pretty popular. TikTok's even out there.
Yes, there's a book talk part of TikTok.
But as a general rule, to succeed, to win, to reach your the desired apex of, if you can find yourself on Goodreads and BookBub,
yes,
then
I'm huge on being big fans of those.
Those are the two places where you want your books to be. Yes. And there are others that are out there that you can't just walk into that and get those.
No, but you have a little bit more, not necessarily control, but you have a little bit more personal ability to use those than you do other things.
That's correct. And
because they have a built-in infrastructure for helping you promote your books.
Exactly.
And you can use them as advertising platforms to help you get into the more organic portion of those. Mm-hmm. Because you get to be one of the featured books in either BookBub or Goodreads, you've got it made.
That's correct. Yeah, and traditional publishing knows that they're going to tie you into that. That's the thing that's going to happen.
Well, but the thing I like about those two platforms, before we get back to Martin's question about dialogue, is that it's a great tool for those who do choose to go either hybrid, which is both traditional and self-published, or just self-published at all, because it's very much a democratic platform in that respect. It doesn't care where the book is from.
No. If it's good and you can get it in there, and of course you can't just walk in and do it, but if you can find your way to become part of that, people will see there.
You can use, like I said, you can use that as an advertising platform. That's not entirely, for lack of a better word, editorially driven.
Right.
So, but if you can get picked as one of the featured books, which is more editorially driven.
Yeah.
But if you use it to get your name and your book out there, that's how you get.
Well, it vets you to a certain degree of professionalism, saying, this is not a hack. I hate to use that word, but
I hate that word entirely because you and I differ greatly on this, and that's partially differences in how we've approached certain things elsewhere in life. I tend to be more entrepreneurially minded in a lot of things, even though I've not done stuff on my own for quite some time. I'm much more. Not necessarily forgiving as a better word, but much more sympathetic to those who are willing to go out and be their own publisher.
Sure.
Because today, being your own publisher does not mean you're paying to print up 1,000 books that you hope somebody will then buy from you. That's not how it works.
No, those are vanity publishers and those are scams, and you got to be real careful about those.
You should never pay anybody other than the cost of printing a book if you want to do it yourself.
Right.
But that's it. You should never pay anybody a fee to print and distribute your book.
Yes, caveat emptor, folks, because they are everywhere. They will once the word gets out that you've written a book, they will be all over your butt to try.
For the self-published person, the best thing that ever happened really is Amazon, because you can put your book on Amazon digitally for free, and they will create physical copies, but you only pay for the copy that gets printed and shipped.
Yeah, on demand.
And that is the way to go. Yeah. And everything I've seen... so one of the things that I want to talk about today was Kick-Ass Writer by Chuck Wendig.
Right.
He's big on hybrid publishing, meaning you do both.
Do both, okay.
Do both.
Right.
Because everybody who makes a lot of money, they do both. Even Stephen King does both.
Sure.
He has self-published.
Right, yeah.
Now, granted, for Stephen King, self-publishing is kind of a... Well, Stephen King, they're still going to buy it. but
aren't those his recent things that he's done? Like he's done some crime novels.
He's done some crime. He's one of the few authors that has crossed multiple genres.
Yeah.
Most authors will tell you
because he has a brand
with a genre.
Yeah.
Well, and he started out with the horror.
That's correct.
That's all he did.
He's thought of as a horror guy, but he's done many things.
But he doesn't even do straight horror. He's never really been a monster writer.
Yeah.
He's been psychological horror, supernatural horror. He's my ideal as far as that goes.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to craft, there's no
oh my
doubt.
God, he is the king of craft.
King of
yes.
craft. That's
king
correct.
of craft.
But I do want to circle back to Mark's
let's go back to the dialogue.
Yeah, because we're at 54, so let's.
There's still a ton of stuff that I still wanted to even talk about.
I know. Let's rock and roll right on this.
So dialogue.
Tell me about dialogue.
Well, for one thing, I do want to differentiate between dialogue and voice. Yeah. It's very important that you do that because you have to establish, and you probably won't do it even in your first draft, perhaps, completely, the voice of your individual characters. When you look on the page, when you read them, you should be able to differentiate who this person is. But that's a function of the development of character.
Yeah, and it takes difficult to do that.
Oh, when you start out, you probably won't even hear it.
Characters are similar. Like cops are all going to sound like cops.
Well, that's why you have to make.
Like
that's why you have to make them have their unique voice.
Yeah,
it's an essential because otherwise, if they all sound the same,
but they really don't. Because think about it this way, and this helps you differentiate the voices. Yeah. The 30-year veteran on the force is going to talk different than the rookie.
Exactly,
and
that's right.
What I'm trying to do.
And you will
having the more veteran cop. He's the one that swears about everything.
Right. Well, and
the younger guy is not quite where he's comfortable,
Right.
Well, and you might
probably be more of an idealist, and that idealism it should come out in his dialogue. On the crook side, the capo is going to talk a lot differently than the guy in the street selling drugs or pushing the hookers or whatever his
surprisingly, especially once you get that first draft done, one of the things you'll figure out when you go back through it is how to differentiate those voices better. Because you'll have an idea of who they really are.
But and very much that is very much true. Because especially, I think even a total plotter, as opposed to a total pantser, your idea of who the character isn't fully formed until well into the book.
That's correct, and it morphs a little bit.
I'm finding myself sharpening the differences as I go.
Yes, and that's the kind of things you will edit
the main gangbanger and his boss. Mm-hmm. Like I am giving them slightly different voices now when I originally was not.
Yeah, one of the things I want to talk about, that's a great one to talk about because one of the things that comes to dialogue, there's 2 or 3 things that everybody needs to remember, and you're probably not going to really pick up on it until you get into your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and beyond drafts. Because the first one, you just need to get it down on paper. As Wendig says, finish your shit.
That's right. Yeah. That's ultimately it. Yes, that's right.
Finish your shit. And what he means by that is, do your first draft. Don't go back and keep editing the same damn 3 chapters that you've done. Finish it and then go back in it. Because very few authors can edit as they go. Jenkins is one of the few. You guys know I'm a big fan of his writing advice. He will write a chapter or write a scene, whatever it is, and when he goes back the next day, he will edit what he's written and then go on to the next bit. It works for him.
I do a little of that. It's got to be readable for me.
And that's
it.
I do not like doing that. Now, there's a problem with there's a potential problem with that.
Yeah.
For those who are total pantsers, which is how I approach the first half of my book.
Yeah.
And which is how Martin is doing his total pantser. Which, you know what? I think that's good early.
Oh yeah,
because it gets you to realize, I need to think about this ahead of time. I should have thought about this ahead of time.
Yeah, and you get there, and that's
you need a mix.
It's a way of learning.
Yes, it is. It is
learning by doing.
That is exactly right, and your editing.
It's the way I felt I had to do it.
Yeah, your editing will give you a completely different version when you realize it because by the time you reach the end, you know things that you didn't know before.
Right, and I've thought about little fixes like.
Just put it in the back of your mind.
I shouldn't have had this character start the conversation. I should have had a different character. start.
There's some of that.
Minor as that. It
I
can be
change it a little bit, and then what it does is it gets my mind working through
That's
what
how
I
it's,
need to do
that's how it's
next.
supposed to. Every once in a while, you'll run into a point where you realize, oh hell, I am screwed because I didn't. This portion back here is wrong.
yes.
And that's when you stop and you go back because you know that
For me,
you want to finish it as is.
I want to finish it because I would rather go back and do the fixes all at once, and for this reason, is that and I discovered this when I was story grading my book, is that I can see the overarching thing as a whole. So once I go through the analysis and I've got my summary of all my scenes or chapters. And I've got what's going on, and I got, all right, here's my inciting incident in the scene. Here's my progressive complications. Here's my crisis. Here's my resolution. Here's my denouement. All of these pieces that go into the scene and to the whole book, I can see it at once. I can see the big hole where, in this scene, these people are acting like they've never met before, but they actually met 5 scenes ago, and you just forgot when you were pantsing it.
Oh, so you've got a structure to that editing that makes sure you don't miss things,
right? And so that I can see, I'm talking about this here, but really, I should have had this scene moved here because they need to show up earlier in the book.
Yeah, I did a little bit of that.
Just in general, I just like the big view. Now, it doesn't mean I shouldn't make notes as I realize, I screwed this up, I need to fix it. Because you should always make notes when you discover that stuff.
Yeah. I've done it both ways, but every once in a while, if it's a big issue, you realize sometimes I can't, if I keep writing as I'm going without fixing this, I'll take it someplace so far from where I really need to be that I'll triple work to fix it.
Well, that's a slightly different situation though than
it's rare. It's rare. But if you're pantsing, it's a danger.
Yeah, but I mean that's a slightly different situation than I should go back and fix this because I've changed the direction or forgotten something or whatever. Because you're talking about a third thing. You're talking about taking a different direction from your current point.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you're talking about fixing past points, Martin.
Well,
or adjusting things or whatever.
What's happening is because I'm not working continuously.
Yes, and that's what my problem was.
I'll freely admit I'm a total beginner, total amateur. I have no idea whether this will be any good or whether I'll even finish it. I'm going to try.
Oh, you got to finish it.
I got to try. I know
finish your shit.
Finish your shit. That's right. If you do nothing other than self-publish and we buy it, at least you can say, hey, I'm
a published novelist.
Yeah, that's right.
But what I'm finding is, since I'm not working continuously, I'll have a brainstorm.
Yes.
I'll be thinking about what I've written.
You are working continuously. It's just a part of it when it's not physical, it's mental.
Yes. I'm going,
you are working continuously.
I know what's wrong with that. I needed to have it done a little differently because I can add some more tension. I can add a little more conflict.
That's right.
If I just do it this slightly different way.
Right. Well,
and then I'll go and rewrite that one
You'll
piece.
find that's actually usually a late stage revelation that you find when you read back through it. You realize, I wasted this opportunity here to show the relationship between these characters, even though because it was very perfunctory here. That's what you're doing.
By adding that conflict,
all you have to do
characters to be more of a I need to show her as somebody who is not a martinet. I need to show her being a boss, but being a boss for a good reason.
That's right. See, and because you're building character, and character builds come a lot of times later. And some of it is reinforcing what you've already done, but it's also realizing to be consistent because you might have a point. There's a point where one of my characters is wounded in the first book, and I was just recently rereading it, and when people come in to help him, it's kind of very perfunctory. I'm thinking, no. If she loves him and he's wounded, she's going to change the.
Freak.
Well, no, that's not her. She doesn't freak.
Well, but she's
going to hold him in her lap while they're waiting, and she's soothing him while he's in pain. That's the sort of characterization that you build, and you're taking something that is very perfunctory. You got to get from point A to point B, but you're retooling it in such a way where it also reflects, not builds necessarily, but reflects character, because this is, fairly in the way.
Yeah.
And that gives a consistency throughout the book that people go for.
That's polishing. I think
that's correct.
That's a different level than
I'm way late in...
To me, that's way up here polishing.
Yeah.
My hands are above my head, audience.
That's exactly right.
As opposed to what we were talking about initially on this, what started the whole editing discussion, because I still have points I want to make about your dialogue.
Right.
So there's structural editing.
Yes.
Which is generally what you're going to do after you've written your first draft. Now, like I said, some people can do that during the first draft.
Uh-huh.
I don't like it, especially if I'm spending a lot of time away from it, because that's when you're really going to screw it up. Because that's what happened to me. I was not in my first half of the book. Had huge blocks of time where I just wasn't able to sit with it. And that's where most of my problems come. Once I was getting the daily work in or the several times a week work in, everything flowed much smoother.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm finding is because of the enforced breaks, if I go back and fiddle, it gets me
I'm glad you mentioned that, because
go on to something new.
There are several highly respected authors. That's their modus operandi. Is when they sit down to write something new, they go back and reread the chapter they were the day before or the scene before.
I think most writers will probably do that
to try and get themselves back to where.
Because that's just natural to
Yeah. Otherwise, you're very disjointed, and that's harder to fix.
I am also finding myself doing a little bit what you're talking about. I'll know a scene doesn't quite work, like there's something a little bit wrong with it, but I don't know how to fix it yet, so I just leave it.
Absolutely.
Right, and absolutely, that's what
keep on rolling. That's right.
Don't fret over this one piece that doesn't
unless
work.
You think it is a foundationally structural issue that will F you down the road, you don't bother with it.
Well, and even then, again, there's no hard and fast rules. I challenge that. Because your statement was very dogmatic, and
it was. It's because I found it to be true myself.
But that's
many
what
others
works
don't.
for you.
That is right,
and that's what I want to make sure that our listeners understand. There are very few dogmatic rules about how you go about writing.
And that's
for you. If you have to go back and fix that, because the way I look at it is this.
Well, that's my CDO. That's part of it.
Well, that's I've got that too.
Yeah.
But part of my CDO is I got to get this done. Move on to the next thing.
See, that's right.
But all to me, that whole statement about if you don't fix this, it's going to screw you later down the road. Because your thing was if you don't fix it now. Well, to me, that doesn't matter because it's in the past. Literally, it's in the past of the book, and it's in the past of you. Hold on, in the past of you.
Yeah.
And if you know, all right, this is wrong. I got to have this changed. To me, and again, this is what works for me. If that works for you, that's fine. But
the difference would be in. I'm speaking of the first book. It had a historical framework. That's
methodology, though.
I had to adhere to that.
Well, yes, but you had a lot of that historical framework. Basically, the verbiage,
the exposition
of dump. In a lot of places.
In that first draft,
that was methodology.
That
wasn't necessarily. I have to fix this because John is secretly gay, and that has to come out. Because that's an entirely different kind of. Obviously, that's not.
No, he's not. No,
he is not.
He's a raging heterosexual.
But that is the kind of thing, though, that is a huge structural issue that you can change how you write the character, the scene, whatever, from the point you realize, oh, that needs to be fixed. Without it, you don't have. Because I guess what I'm trying to say is, your point was, if I don't fix this, it's going to screw everything up later. That's not true. It's only going to do that if you keep writing it as if this were true, the thing you want to fix.
Yeah.
You make your change from... And again, this is the way I work.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You write...
You presume that it's fixed.
Yes, you presume you know what you're going to fix.
There you go.
And you keep writing. Because if you keep writing as if this wasn't fixed...
Yeah.
Well, that's a dumbass move.
Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about. That's why you go back and fix it.
But my point is you don't have to go back and fix it.
Yeah, you could just
immediately
put a push pin in it.
Put a pin in it and say, I got to fix this.
I've done that many times too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Or you'll find this can be from big things to teeny weeny things. When you realize she's got the snot kicked out of her in chapter 16, well, that should kind of if she's been physically beaten up, she should have the bruises and stuff. That should appear occasionally. You don't want to lose that.
Right.
For but you also don't want to belabor the point either.
Well,
because I've gone through and added in pieces, and I'm like, well, I don't need to do it that.
If something happens to the character, and it has no effect later, you probably shouldn't have it happen.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Especially when it's a big thing, when she's got the snot kicked out of her.
Well, and then it becomes misogynistic porn.
Yeah, well,
and you don't want that.
You don't want that.
Yeah,
because you've read the scenes I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. And that was a very well done scene. You have to make sure that you are consistent with those things. So that's a whole big discussion about approach to editing. Totally off topic.
We could do a whole Hoopajoob on editing.
Absolutely,
and I think we should do that. But to go back to your dialogue that we've been trying to finish.
Yeah. So one of the things you were talking about voice a lot. Dialogue. I want to step back.
I know that's a part of what he's talking about. Wendig is talking about here with Kick-Ass Writer. He's talking about dialogue and stuff, and I am going to try to dig into this.
So dialogue is extremely important for a lot of reasons.
It's where most of the magic happens. Core. I think
dialogue is what moves the story more than most anything else. Now, that's not to say that Johnny pulling out his gun and shooting somebody doesn't move the story.
Yeah, there are action scenes.
Because there are, but the character bits. Are in the dialogue.
The revelations.
Well, not just revelations. Defining who the character is, how they deal with things. A lot of that's in dialogue. It's not entirely in dialogue, but it's very important that the dialogue reflect those things. It's also important that the dialogue is natural. So this is a great example of this. I use this when I talk about certain things when it comes to writing. If you have your character say, well, as you know, such and such happened, and so I did this.
Yeah.
That is exposition put in the dialogue.
Yeah, bad business.
And you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's very amateurish.
Because you would never say, we're sitting around here having a bull session, well, as you know, I did this back in '83. No, that's not. That's right. We don't talk that way, right? So it's very, but to a certain degree, your characters can't always talk 100% naturally the way people do because a lot of times there's shorthand.
Yeah.
That won't always work in a book because you can't. But there are certain things that do, that you can shortcut your shortcut. To expanding it. And
if it's part of the character, if you want to establish that this character likes to summarize stuff at the end, because that's how he thinks about stuff, that's how he thinks it through, then you can do a little.
It's dangerous, very dangerous.
It depends on how you do it.
A sentence you can get away with. Paragraphs, hell no.
Well, the way I would deal with it is not the way you would deal with it. The way I would deal with something like that is actually having somebody cut the guy off when he's starting to do one of those.
Yeah, that's
because dude, we already know this. Forget it. Let's go get the bag. Whatever.
Yeah.
But because that could be a trait. That's the kind of trait that you might want to make fun of.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned
as
that.
opposed to letting him ramble, because the reader already knows what he's going to summarize.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, if it's the kind of thing where they're having a meeting about how they're going to tackle the problem, like the stereotypical blues, Hill Street Blues, where they do the morning roll call.
Right. I mean, that's part of when you do cop stuff. To me, when you see it on TV and it's all action.
Yeah,
that's not really.
No, it's not. I mean, Barney Miller's better.
Well, it's like the military. It's 99% boredom and 1% sheer howling terror.
Yeah. You've got to have the cops sit around and kick this stuff around because you're not immediately going to come up with the exact right answer.
Well, and
like a cop's not going to go, oh, well, I know who it is, and let's go make it.
Well, that's because the dialogue is part of the process of the solving the crime.
Right.
That's key in a crime novel or a mystery or a murder mystery or any of those sort of things. Is dialogue is usually where things are revealed.
Problem solving is done verbally, either mentally, thoughts.
Which you can do that.
Like I don't want to do a Sherlock Holmes, Monk, Columbo at the end. List it all out. I don't want to do that. That's kind of.
Well, you are more an action. You're writing more of an action thriller.
Yeah,
than it is a crime thriller. Is not a murder mystery.
Yeah, there's value to that. Who done it reveal at the end? Everybody loves that,
but that's its own.
Right.
It's its own genre. It's
still one of the best-selling authors.
Right.
You know?
And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give the reader an insight on how they're figuring it out as they go.
It's more of a police procedural in the sense that your thing is how they go about it, not necessarily the big reveal at the end.
Right.
And I honestly, that's kind of thing
There
I
will
prefer.
be one of those.
Yeah, because there has to be.
But it's not going to be this kind of...
It should be something like a Sherlock Holmes where all of the stuff is pulled out of his ass.
Well, yeah, or worse, the Agatha Christie where the murderer is revealed. The last page.
Well,
and that's
okay.
For her, because it's expected and it became a big thing.
In general, I think that can be okay if the author has done a good job of leading the reader, now with fits and starts.
That's
it's
right.
a mystery, you know.
Yeah.
So that when you get there, the author or the reader is not like, oh, hell, I didn't see that coming at all. I gotta. It's like, no, don't see it.
Yeah.
If there's that, then
but if you get it, I didn't see that, and you go, oh shit, there it is.
Then you got
a winner.
Yes.
See, it's just a genre trope, and it's an expectation.
That's where I'm trying to hide it from the reader, leave some clues, and then have it be a big surprise.
You'll figure out in your editing process how to really polish that. And having come through that, I can tell you that.
Yeah, you don't want the reader to be able to guess it in the second chapter, but you don't want them to be totally, oh, that doesn't make any sense when you get to the last chapter.
Yeah.
So, back to dialogue, though. So, dialogue, it should move the story. It should reveal important things. It should not be pedantic and obvious. Yeah. Just like with the narration, the narrator should not state the obvious. So, it's a great meme going, Baron. You might, I don't know how much you guys have seen it, because I've seen it on Facebook. I know Francis is not a whole lot on Facebook.
Some, but not much.
Yeah, and Martin is on it more than Francis. And so it's how I normally write. Joe walked into the room. How I write for NaNoWriMo. Because, the whole point is to do 50,000 words in a month.
Right.
Joe carefully considered the choice before him. He grasped the doorknob firmly, twisted it silently, and pulled very carefully on the door, peeked into the room, and decided it was safe, and carefully took 2 cautious steps, one by one, into the room. Because the whole point is, to pad the words.
Yeah, you pad the words.
Your dialogue and your prose can't do either one of those things. It's the, as you know, syndrome, as I like to call it. Jenkins calls it with prose, on-the-nose writing. The whole spelling every minuscule move out, that's on the nose. You skip the stuff both in dialogue and narration that the reader can figure out from other clues.
You have to have some little bits to give it some animation.
That's
motion is critical in what you're doing here, but it's not step-by-step type thing.
Yes.
Right. So I just kick in a little bit, savor a quick sip of coffee, and then get to the dialogue.
Well, and inserting that within your dialogue actually it fruits it out. It really makes it a much better. It's a beat, is what it's called.
Yeah.
And your dialogue now. Again, this is all personal choice. Some people like to write like Hemingway. You can do this with 2 characters in the room and nobody else in there, batting back and forth with no tags. Boom, boom,
But you know what? Even that is very dangerous.
It is.
Very often, it is so easy to lose track of which person is speaking.
That's why you drop in your beats where...
Well, it's not even just the...
And the occasional dialogue tag, or whatever it takes you to recognize that you want to make sure... You can only do that for so long before you go back to, John did this, or John moved his arm, or whatever it is, to kind of remind you of where it's at. If you have distinct voices, it's easier.
It's easier, but it's
dangerous.
So,
you have to be very careful. See, Hemingway could do this stuff for pages upon pages upon pages upon pages. Read Farewell to Arms. It's back and forth between him, between the main character and the nurse for pages, and you never lose. Never lose sight.
Male and female, that's easier. You have 2 men or 2 women in scene.
Well, that's correct. That's right.
That's really difficult because it is very difficult. Because one of the things about dialogue, so you're talking about with crime. You're talking about gang members in yours,
right.
and so
they've got to talk a certain way.
They've got to talk a certain way,
but they're amongst their own, and the cops are amongst their own for most of the time. Rarely do they meet.
Right.
Well, but
so
that has nothing to do with the point I was going to make. The tendency when you have something that distinct, because again, they're going to have their own language, their own accents, most likely.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, most gangs tend to be some type of ethnicity based. The Crips and the Bloods are not a mix of every ethnic group.
And that's hard to bring through on the page.
But the thing is, but you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful with that because it comes off, if you try and write an accent or use too much slang, it's very difficult to make that not condescending or sounding false because that's not how you speak. Right. It's very difficult. So, like, people who try to write Southern accents into their words almost always fail.
Yeah,
because they will do this exaggerated...
Just make them talk.
This exaggerated way of saying a particular thing. And that's whether that's a Southern accent or the way gang members talk.
Yeah.
You don't want to do, for all African Americans, you don't want to do yo, yo, yo all the time.
Right.
Bullshit like that. Stereotypical stuff that, even in books and movies, especially in movies, you see, you're like, come on, that sounds fake.
Right. You've got to balance it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to balance it with...
Now, they shouldn't use colloquial, the King's English.
Right.
But on the other hand, they shouldn't
kind of
be...
establish a little bit of... There are certain terms they use.
Yes. Terminology is different, though, from accent and slang.
Yeah, because there are names they call each other. There are names they call the rival gang members. And they will use those.
There are certain names you should not use no matter what.
Yeah.
Because you will not get your book published.
Yeah. But that's what they do. I mean, they have a term that they call the rival members, and it's always derogatory.
Right.
And they use that.
And that's a good way to lend authenticity to it. Without being over the top.
Right. And then balancing out, well, okay, you don't need to go in like you said. They're not going to say yo, yo, yo every 5 seconds.
Right.
Cut that.
Well, you can find yourself devolving into caricature very quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's
dangerous.
That's what happens when people try to fake these written accents.
Yeah, we've all read those, and we usually cringe.
Yeah, yes. I've not really tried to do accent. I've just tried to do the language they use, and in my head thinking, does this sound menacing? Because these are really bad dudes. They should sound somewhat menacing to the reader.
Which leads...
Is this a guy you want to hang out with? No. He's a killer.
Well,
he's a freaking killer.
That is absolutely critical to what you're doing here because the emotion, which we've not talked about, but I know we're way over time. We need to finish up. And we can do that.
Yeah.
It's all about the emotion that you create within your reader. Absolutely. Yeah. Everything, that's all it really matters.
I'm very subtly trying to make you afraid of these.
Well, that's exactly what you want to do without beating them over the head, of course.
One of the things we've talked about before, and I think I brought this up, because that's why I think I did, because it comes to mind, because it's a phrase I know from other things. Motion creates emotion.
Very true. Yeah. Yes, very true.
And that is something that we talked about and is a great, yes, when we're talking about things. I don't know, we talked about it on the show.
Well, you and I talked about it for the very last scene of my first book, where originally I had them characters sitting across the table talking.
Yes,
that's where this really came up. And I ended up in a rewrite deciding, no, these two characters need to take a walk. Because he has basically run off with another woman and left her, and they're at odds over this. She's hurt, and he's trying to make amends, pitifully so, because he does. Yeah, and
he's emotionally stunted himself.
Correct.
So
that's right, because of who he is. And
that kind of conversation, sitting across from each other at a table. It's hard to create motion except through the words, and that's quickly can get into a caricature, or you have to start doing things like using dialogue tags besides said and asked.
Right. Whereas in the rewrite, it changed everything.
Yeah, it's much easier to make reference to movement.
Well, that's
when
right.
Actually moving.
Well, that's right, because she was able to leave him where he is and move on because she's crying because of what he's made her feel, and he has to run up and put himself in front of her and bend down and look her in the face, and all those different things like that you're going on. And when he asks her to try not to hate, she looks up into the leaves and says, "Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?" Things like that.
Yeah,
that
I try to keep a lot of those little hints. That I found that very valuable from you guys. Little things, lighting cigarettes.
That's right.
Absolutely. Just little. The guy doesn't have to do a lot. You don't have to like. He picked up his lighter. Took 3 tries, or you don't do any of that.
No, very brief.
You just the scrape of the wheel on the lighter and lights up a cigarette, and then they're talking again.
Well, even that probably is
little, but yeah, just little, but keep it short, keep it quick, and I found that very valuable. It's been very helpful in getting me flowing as I've...
Motion and emotion are big.
Yeah. And one last thing.
It's a real picture in your head for the reader.
Exactly.
You can actually picture this guy when I talk about his dreadlocks and swaying his shoulders and lighting a cigarette, but I've got that spread out over a whole chapter. Yeah. These little hints about him. And
you should do something menacing, not just hint at it.
Yeah, and find myself really... This is a picture. You see this guy in your head now.
Well, that goes back to the showing versus telling. Yes.
So, and this is something that I love this example that I got from Jenkins, because I've read and watched so many of his videos. He was talking with his editor about a particular character in her book, and he described the character as I don't remember exactly. This is a typical nerd, computer nerd, or something like that. And the editor comes back and is like, well, that needs to be more. You need to say, he was tall and gangly or whatever, and with greasy hair and pair of glasses held together with a Band-Aid and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if that's what you think it should be, that means you've already seen it in your head. I don't need to say it anymore. So that's a great,
right.
Yeah.
Assuming that's what he wanted him to see.
Well, but see, now that's one of Jenkins' things, is that you need to let
the reader see what the reader wants to see.
Exactly. He calls it engaging the theater of the reader's mind.
Yeah.
And that's been an awesome hint from you guys as well. Again, little hints, little images, not big ones.
Because it's very rare.
Picture the guy the rest of the way in your head.
It's very rare that you need the reader to have a very exacting picture of something. The actual crime scene, yes, you probably need a very exact picture of that. Your main female protagonist has very specific features you must give. Right? But for the most part, most people and places, you can just give a very 1 or 2 word description, and people will fill in the rest of it.
Tall, short, brown hair, black hair, whatever, and that's about it.
Well, you don't even necessarily need to do that.
No,
because hair color doesn't necessarily matter. And you don't even have to say they're tall. Because you can talk about how
important the character is.
They moved across the room in 2 paces. Or, in 2 short strides, 2 strides, they're there. Or the character they're going somewhere with has to practically run to keep up with them. That implies that the other character is tall and has long legs. So even descriptions like that, you can work into the narrative of the story with motion.
Without having to be overt.
Yeah.
That's the win if you can get it.
Yes, is to keep from being overt.
That's right.
In my head as well, I found that very valuable from you guys as well. Just keep the descriptions minimal.
I mean, you may write them out the first time, but when you edit, you realize, nope,
keep going.
cut that out.
So really,
that's where that works.
Draw you a complete picture of what this guy looks like. Let's let you have it in your mind. He played high school football. That means he probably looks a certain way.
Yep.
Yeah,
and if
he played high school football 20 years ago, that probably means he looks differently than he's probably got a big gut now, and people are going to have a picture.
Yeah.
You think, former high school football player 20 years down the road, they're not going to think, male model kind of physique.
Let the reader see who they want to see a little bit.
Exactly.
Because it gives them some buy-in to that person anyway. It makes it very personal when you think of when you imagine that person off of that one hint, then it gives you buy-in to that character.
One of the things that is so important with that engaging the theater, the reader's mind, is that it gives them ownership of the story with you. It's your story.
Yeah.
But when they read it, they become part of it. It's like when you... so we've all done theater. It's like when you have a script. The author wrote that script. He's got something very specific in mind. But when you put the play on, the actors and the audience will interpret that a little bit differently. They'll see things, or they'll play the character differently, somewhat necessarily, because it's got to work with their temperament as well. So you can't dictate everything for the reader. If you do, the reader's going to get bored
very quickly. Yes.
So one last thing.
Yes, excellent. And then
actually, a couple of last things. So for those who want to write, definitely pick up on writing. That's by Stephen King.
By Stephen King. Wait a minute. Let's see here.
That is such a great book. It's not a whole lot on the actual mechanics of writing, so much as it is. It's a little bit autobiographical.
Yeah, it's a memoir.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a memoir of the craft. Stephen King on writing,
and he talks a lot about his processes and what have you. I think anything you can find that gives you an insight into another author's approach is valuable. And then the other book, again, I got those for you guys. And then I also got us all copies of Kick-Ass Writer by Chuck Wendig.
That's right.
Wendig, he's done some Star Wars novels and a bunch of other things. He's apparently very famous. But once I started saying, oh, yes, I've heard of this. But it's very funny. I also recommend you get the audiobook version because he's hilarious. When he actually does it verbally, it's even better. But... there's so much, but most important thing he says, finish your shit. Finish what you start.
That's right.
There's no more important, other than sit down and actually put your fingers on the keyboard, the next best advice is finish your shit. So, let me answer this one
here real quick. Show me what the donkey smells like.
Yes!
That's what we were just talking about. Those little hints. You don't have to overdo it, but just a little hint about what's going on. That's just... at random, putting my thumb in the book.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways that you can approach this book is to read the whole thing straight through, but then also just pick it up and do a bit of Lectio Divina.
Yes, very much so.
Which is just basically, that's where you take scripture and you open it up to any particular page and you read and you contemplate. Well, the same thing with this. You open up to any particular page and, you just pick one and, here's one. Prepare yourself for the high-octane energy drink enema. He's talking about ways to defeat writer's block. He says, I'm not actually recommending an energy drink enema, just so we're clear. I will not be held liable for embarrassing x-rays that make it onto the internet. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's adding character and flavor to a non-fiction book in a very creative way.
Quite the sense of humor.
Right. Talking about writing is not the same as writing. We talk about
that.
Yeah, we talked about this entire hour and a half, but it's not writing. Mm-hmm. It's creative because it's free-flowing, but it's not the same as writing.
Sure.
Speaking of which, one last question. Why? Why are you writing?
Compelled. Yes. I think it is a truism for most writers, whether they recognize it at the beginning or not. All writers have a compulsion to sit down in front and create.
As King says, writers write.
Writers write. You have the ability, you have a desire to create. I think this goes back to given to us by our Creator. That's one of our greatest strengths is we as humans have the ability to build.
So now we're getting those eternal questions part of the show.
Right. The desire to create something. In fact, we are not fulfilled unless we find a way to create something. Otherwise, it is a joke. To go back to Alan Moore,
it's a very drab and dreary existence when you can't create something. And I don't necessarily mean writing or art. Well, just even having kids and raising
that's correct.
Family is an act of creation.
The desire to be a parent is the same thing. It is. We all have that desire. And without that desire being pursued, we have a tendency to fall into issues like addictions and distractions and all sorts of things like that.
Ultimate narcissism, in my opinion.
Yeah, right.
Because the act
there's a gravitational pull towards that.
Yeah.
That you have to do.
Since I'm the captain, I will do mine last. Martin, why do you write? What's in it for you here?
I want to prove to myself that I can do it.
Nothing wrong with that, absolutely.
Not at all. That's right.
I've long wanted to. I mean, even going back to high school, and I never really kind of got the juice going. And now I've got the juice going, and if it never goes anywhere, and maybe if I self-publish, or no one ever reads it besides you guys, or even if you all don't read it, at least I've proved.
I guarantee we'll read it.
Yeah, we'll read it.
I proved to myself I could do it, and what I have found afterwards is I enjoy it.
Yes.
Because it's me. It's all about me.
Nobody gets to tell you how to do it.
Damn phone.
That's right.
I don't have to hear about somebody's life story when they couldn't decide what to click on. And it's just...
Or how they were afraid it was going to break if they clicked the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's like, well, I've got this message here that says, click here to fix OneDrive. Well, then freaking click it and leave me alone.
Right. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of authors would agree with that.
So me and so myself. And it's not like I'm sitting chained to the desk. Hell, I'll get up and, change my Spotify or my Sirius XM channel and play with the dog, or I got to take the dog or whatever. But it's me, and everybody leaves me alone, and I just sit and do it and just have a little fun. And it's fun to make up words coming out of someone else's mouth.
Yeah. That's great. So that is the curmudgeon writer, because that's essentially the writer's version of, hey, you kids, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
Which is, writers need that. It's very difficult. Even when writers collaborate, they very rarely are going to sit in the same room and decide which word comes next.
Yeah.
They trade chapters back and forth. They trade scenes back and forth.
Right. And to be a really successful author is a collaborative process. You've got to work with an editor who's going to fix your screw-ups and draw you out as a reader would, as the persona of the reader, saying this is a hole you got to draw out.
The very act of writing is a collaboration with the reader. That's what I was talking about, when you engage the reader's imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's great.
It's fun that as you go along, it's just all about me.
Yeah, I get that. So, for me, the why comes down, it's similar to what Francis was talking about, but I phrase it a little bit differently. And for me, it's because I feel like I am a storyteller.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you say, well, of course, if you're a writer, you're a storyteller. It's like, no, that's not exactly the same thing.
Right, yes.
Because you can tell a story in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
One of the ways that I see myself as a storyteller is that when I do artistic pieces, I have a story in mind behind that piece.
Of course. Yes.
It's not just, unless it's just, if it's a character sketch, that's one thing. But even so, I've probably got a background for that particular shot. And to me, being a storyteller is very much, as Francis said, it's a creative process. But it's also collaborative, as we just talked about with you, Martin. It's collaborative with others in the sense that you want them to experience what you have created.
Yeah.
If you only write for yourself, well, that's fine. But I think you're missing out.
Yes.
Because the whole idea, is not just to have written, but it's to be read.
Yes, for somebody else to validate you and say, this is good.
Ultimately, yes, that is the preference.
Yeah, that's the preference.
But if they've read it and they've had a reaction to it, sometimes that's just as important. Because some things you write, people are going to say, oh, well, that's stupid. Well, okay, that's fine. That's your opinion. Why? Because it goes back to what we do here. I want to know the why.
Yeah, that's right.
When we talk about stuff here, why is so important.
Yeah. And part of that is hard for me. I'm not wired in that same creative way. I'm more of my hemispheres don't talk quite as much, because I'm not as creative as you guys are, especially Robert. So it becomes more of a prove it.
Yeah.
Again, it is about an accomplishment that I've long wanted to try, that I'm not sure I have the stamina for, but I want to try.
Well, I think the creative aspect, it's part and parcel of who man is. We're the only animals that tell stories that we are aware of.
Yeah.
But when you think about how much this is part of our core beings, you think about being a kid and playing. When you play make-believe, cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians or whatever, that's storytelling, living it out.
Yeah.
So it's part of our nature. That's why some authors, that they say, well, this is so foreign to me, or some people say this whole thing is foreign to me. It's not. You're just not looking at it the right way. And that's why readers, people who are real readers, they recognize this.
Yeah.
I think most people who want to write, they're readers first.
Yeah.
Whether it's fiction or non-fiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't be a writer, I think, without reading. That's the other thing King says. Writers write, but writers also read.
That's right.
You've got to read your stuff. You got to read other people's. Your stuff is in your genre. You got to read other genres. You got to read nonfiction. You got to read short stories. You got to read articles. You got to read current events. All of these things will help spark that creativity. And for me, that creativity is the important part. We all work in Martin and I work in very non-creative things.
Problem solving
things. We make it creative because of how we approach the problem solving.
Yeah.
And that's how I take my creativity out of my work, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Now, your job now, it's a little bit more creative than the ones you've had in the past.
That's correct. You get to decide how we're going to approach this and how we're going to serve this and how we're going to create this and make it work and be very efficient with it.
Yes, you choose how things are presented, information, how things are...
Absolutely.
Yeah, yours is far more creative than jobs you've had in the past, which I applaud you, sir, for being able to do that.
Finally got there.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, we've all had various jobs. Well, except for Martin, he's had like 2 jobs his entire life.
That's true.
Been very fortunate to have found something that grew on me.
Yeah.
That gave me a sense of service for something important.
Yeah.
And that aside from the griping about, again, somebody won't click somewhere, but the people I serve are doing an important function in society, and helping them do it better and quicker has meaning.
Right.
And I respect them a great deal. And
I think writing is similar. We need to wrap this up, but I see writing not just as something that's personally satisfying, but as potentially life-changing for others.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How many books have you read? It's like, wow, this has knocked me over, and I love
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I write fiction as well as nonfiction.
Yeah.
Is that my approach to book. Now, granted, I take the approach to fiction as a narrative nonfiction, so there's a bit of storytelling in that as well. But hopefully, you're dealing with themes and ideas that can be, doesn't have to be, but can be profound, can be life-changing for somebody, even if it's only one person. Hell, even if it's only you.
Yeah.
Because the act of writing is often how we work through our own issues.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And own, mind-expanding things.
Gregory McDonald's Fletch series changed my outlook, changed my sense of humor, changed a lot of, who I am and what I do. Yeah.
Being introduced to PJ O'Rourke.
PJ changed, who I was and my outlook and the way I process and reflect information and things. So.
Yeah.
So this lasted twice as long as I thought it would.
Well, it always does. One last thing, because I think this is important just as a little bit of insight. Favorite author?
Oh, that's one of those things is like favorite author right this minute. It's like favorite bourbon right this minute.
And that's appropriate. Yeah,
that's what I told Sam at the Frazier. It's like, well, right this minute, my go-to is... right now, my favorite nonfiction is Candace Millard.
Yes, we've talked about her many times.
Yeah, Professor Millard's. I just finished her 4th book. And then nonfiction, been through Shara and Brad Thor, but...
You mean fiction?
Yeah, correct. I'm sorry. My current fiction, I still love Gregory McDonald and the Fletch stuff.
Yeah.
I'm also I'm Carl Hyacin, a kind of a cop procedural writer from South Florida, is influencing my current stuff, what I'm doing with my book. So I like his stuff a lot too.
Sure. So, Francis, what about you?
Try to boil it down to just a handful, I suppose. I mean, Hemingway is still a giant.
I knew he was going to say Papa.
Yeah, you have to start with Hemingway. He's so much of the craft and the way he writes, and to be able to work to that, that's certainly one of them. Daniel Silva is the one that really fits my genre right now, and I've been reading a lot of his Gabriel Allon series.
Yeah, that's one I've been meaning to get to try.
Excellent.
But I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, he is definitely worth your time.
Kind of that Vince Flynn.
Similar, that's correct.
Thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it's very. I can't speak highly enough of him. He's kind of the guy that, if you ask me. In my query letters, if you say, what are my books most similar to, I would put myself, because Vince Flynn is more action, whereas Silva is certainly more action, espionage, craft, finding your way. It's just a different type of approach. It's not shoot 'em up, and I don't want that. It's got that human element to it, and Silva's master at that.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite nonfiction?
No, I'll pass on that. I don't know that I could pick one up right off the top of my head.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah.
So,
maybe give it some more thought, but no.
Yeah. So, I'll do it for nonfiction first, since I just asked you that. Scott Hahn. Theology writer. Catholic theology writer. He's convert to the faith like myself. Although I'm not nearly as brilliant when it comes to that as he is. Pardon?
So is Zealot.
Yeah, so is Zealot, yes. Oh, yes, very much so. But he's just a phenomenal writer.
Yeah. You've talked about him.
Yeah, he's phenomenal at taking the complex. And honestly, if I were to pick a second one, I'd pick Pope Benedict. He is phenomenal in the sense of all the meaning he could pack into a single paragraph or a single sentence.
Yeah, he's very good.
I can't pronounce it.
Requiescat in Pacem?
Requiescat in Pacem. Yes, that's correct. Rest in peace.
So yes, Pope Benedict just passed this past Saturday while we were getting ready to head out on our day, because he passed before we were probably away.
Yeah, that very morning.
A lot of people have passed recently. Pele passed.
Did not know that.
Barbara Walters passed.
That? Yeah.
A punk icon that probably most of our people would not recognize. But several comic artists have died recently. Neil Adams, Tom Palmer. Several others that I can't even think of off the top of my head. There's been so many I've been meaning to bring up, and we've not been able to. But anyways, Scott Hahn and Joseph Ratzinger / Pope Benedict, probably for the nonfiction. Fiction, obviously King has a special place in my heart, but also David Weber for the universe he created with Honor Harrington, but specifically just to Honor Harrington, because he needs an editor. He's one of those guys that really needs an editor, I'm finding, and I go back and reread some of his stuff, but I still love him for the universe and the characters he created. But those two, yes. So great stuff. So we've talked about way too much stuff. We've gone almost more than twice as long as we should have. Francis, buddy!
What's next?
Yeah, what's next?
Oh, well, total complete change of subject. New subject, totally new subject. We're going to someplace we've never been. Sort of. We're going to go back to history. We're going to go very hard history, actually. Charlemagne.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Charlemagne. Yeah, the year 800. Charlemagne, the Great. Charles the Great. So much of what we know and so much of where we have come as a species, he's one of the greats. I mean, he deserves that title that he's given. That's not given easily.
Western civilization totally changed because of him.
That's correct, and it's hard. He's one of those linchpin moments where everything became better because of. Even though he's a complex character, we'll talk all about that next time. So enjoy this one.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next time.